2024 saw the release of some insanely good mods for Cyberpunk 2077. We got real-life overhauls, I tried out multiplayer for Cyberpunk 2077 this year, and even some of the game's biggest cut features getting added back in. In this video, I want to show you the best of the best, my personal top 10 Cyberpunk 2077 mods to drop in 2024. And this list will include several mods that'll likely surprise you. I'm not just covering some of the most popular releases, but several that went a bit overlooked this year. And hey, if you enjoy Cyberpunk content, get subscribed, I have a lot more coming. But starting off, we have some improvements to exploration. That thanks to the mod Hidden Gems as Random Events. Thanks to the last 4 years of updates, CDPR has been consistently implementing new secrets into Night City. With almost every single update, we've gotten some kind of patch note that mentions secrets implemented into the world. Hundreds of these are completely unmarked encounters that I'm sure many of you have missed. And I can say quite confidently that nearly all of you watching have missed at least one of these, as they can get super obscure and hidden. That's where Hidden Gems as Random Encounters comes in. Now, as you're nearby a hidden gem in Night City, there's a 25% chance that a map marker will appear on that location, and in turn, you're going to be alerted to it. From there, you'll head over to find something. It can be as big as a totally new weapon that you may have not known was right there, to something a bit smaller like an armor or clothing, or even just a shard that'll give you some backstory or environmental storytelling. But the simple reality is, without this mod, a ton of this content would just be missed by you. I've made videos covering half of these, and I still forget about them in actual gameplay. So overall, this mod serves to make exploration in Night City just a bit more exciting, and it's doing so by bringing some of the otherwise missed content now into the forefront. Plus, with the relatively low 25% spawn rate of this marker, it'll still take a very long time to find everything. But what has become my favorite combat overhaul for Night City, we also have Hardcore 22 V2. So this mod did make it onto a list in the past, but the newly released V2 variant is a separate mod page, as well as brings a plethora of improvements to the mod. At its core, Hardcore 22 will make your combat encounters in Night City more deadly. This is technically done using a variety of balance tweaks for the game. Most enemies will now only have 100 HP, lots of weapons, and even weapon attachments do get some slight tweaks with this one, but in my eyes, this is one of those mods where you can kind of ignore the mod page and really get the feel of it in gameplay. Because with this mod, Night City turns into a place where every enemy can kill you, every weapon you pick up will be deadly, and you're going to utilize more aspects of your kit than ever before. The novelty of this playstyle is a big part of why this is fun. Things are just different compared to your typical Cyberpunk playthrough. Things are more deadly now, so you can absolutely obliterate groups of enemies with things like LMGs and grenades, while before they didn't have nearly as much impact. I mean, hey, even pistols get some unique buffs here to become a true force of nature. And yeah, while quick hacking and sniper builds are still viable, a ton of other things are as well, which just makes the game as a whole a lot more fun. What you'll notice with Hardcore 22 is combat isn't necessarily harder, but your priorities will be different. Now, how you position yourself going into a fight is going to matter a ton. Enemies are able to drop you in one well-placed shot, so you better make sure the enemies can't immediately hit you once combat begins. But conversely, if you do get a great vantage point, you can clear out an entire group of enemies in seconds, because you'll also take down enemies in just a couple of shots. And this mod will seriously level the playing field. Every single enemy, even previously forgettable ones, are now a major threat and can take you down in just a few shots. This serves to make combat encounters consistently tense. You gotta make sure you cleared out everyone, even that last enemy, because yeah, they can be a big problem. And if you do find yourself in a bad position, pinned down by a group of enemies, running isn't as much of an option anymore. Running will often lead you just being flatlined by a couple of rogue bullets, and instead, I found myself oftentimes relying on other parts of my character build. I was taking out grenades for the first time in a playthrough, or thinking back on some of those other perks I took and how they could be useful here. With this mod, you still are able to become tough and a bit tankier, but it'll now heavily rely on cyberware investment, and it will be a considerable investment to survive more than just a couple of shots. And overall, Hardcore 22 is just a blast. It's incredibly well made, and if nothing else, this one download can completely change your next Cyberpunk 2077 playthrough. But maybe you don't need all of that. Perhaps Cyberpunk 2077's combat is almost good enough for you, and there is one mod that can change up combat in a very specific way with Trace Position Overhaul. This mod is really a response to patch 2.0 last year. With that update, stealth net running got a massive nerf, as Sonic Shock would no longer enable you to pick off enemies one by one with quick hacks. So now enemies would almost always become alerted to you and start tracing you, making stealth net running a sprint. Trace Position Overhaul fixes that in a really nice way. So now only certain enemies you come up against will actually have this tracing ice ability, and you can easily see this just by scanning them. So in turn, only enemies that have tracing ice can actually trace your position. So sometimes you'll have groups of enemies that just don't have this, and you can go to town. It makes stealth quick hacking a very viable playstyle through much of Cyberpunk 2077, where in the base game it really isn't. But it does come with other buffs for enemies. Of course, some enemies can still trace you, so you'll have to watch out for those and make note of them. But even further, if there's a netrunner in the group of enemies and attached to their network, that netrunner is going to protect every enemy on the network. So this is a giant buff for netrunners, where if that netrunner is still alive, any of the enemies around them can trace you. So it makes these combat encounters a lot more fun. It's almost like the netrunner is a bit of a mini boss, and you have to take them out to successfully hack everyone else. This creates some really fun combat challenges and almost little puzzles where you just have to get to this one enemy and then the entire challenge becomes a lot easier. Even further, bosses also have the ability to detect you even faster, so those fights are not going to be easier even with this mod. But overall, it just gives you a way to stealthily quick hack in Cyberpunk even from the early game. And really, just put simply, it's very fun and kind of fulfills that power fantasy being able to do this. So I think a mod adding it in as an option is a pretty great addition. So while this may seem like a minor mod at first to make a top 10 list, honestly, as you actually play with this one across a playthrough, it really has a big impact. It's basically a completely new combat option with stealth net running. But if you've ever wanted to fine-tune the visuals of Night City, the best mod for this came out in 2024 with LUT Switcher. LUTs are some of these visual or palette overhauls that you've likely seen. There's a ton of them available for Cyberpunk 2077 right now. Even just one of these mods can completely transform the look of your game. But the problem is there's a ton of them. Which one should you pick? That's where LUT Switcher steps in. This allows you to load a plethora of already supported LUTs and simply compare them on the fly and in-game. So you can see exactly what type of visual differences they're going to make to your game. And this mod even includes a secondary settings menu to make even further tweaks to the LUTs to really get that perfect look for Cyberpunk. And overall, this mod is just a phenomenal utility for the community. Whether it be comparison or even just occasionally switching up your Cyberpunk visuals based off what setting you're going into, I would consider this mod a must download for just about anyone looking to overhaul Cyberpunk 2077 visually. It just makes the whole process a lot easier. But in 2024, we also had modders responding to you, as the single most requested feature to be added to Cyberpunk 2077 was implemented as a mod with New Game Plus Native. This mod will add in a nice new menu option to begin the game anew, and when choosing this, you'll immediately be prompted to load an eligible end-of-game save. This will be the basis for your new game. All of the items, money, levels, cyberware, and hey, even your garage is going to be transferred from this save to a new one at the start of the game. You'll still go through the process of creating your character here, and you could even respec all of those attribute points. Now you're going to have many more based off that previous character's level, but then you'll spawn into Night City at a much higher level with a ton of items from your last playthrough. And while there are quite a few mods that do something similar to that, this one takes things to the next level because you'll also find tougher enemies in that world. So New Game Plus will allow you to either start right after your first job with Jackie to save Sandra Dorset, or you could skip the prologue and Act 1 altogether and just be placed after the prologue ends with the map fully open. So even just as a quick start mod, this is a pretty great option. But on that map, you're going to find enemies with new abilities and just generally tougher fights. This is exactly how CDPR does New Game Plus in some of their other games, so it makes sense to be here. Saving Sandra Dorset, you might find optical camo enemies, Sandevistan being used, and across the game overall, enemies are going to hit you notably harder after starting with New Game Plus. But yeah, that makes sense. You're going to be much better equipped here, have a ton of perks and attribute points that you otherwise wouldn't, but it's this nice balancing act where enemies are also getting a ton of upgrades of their own. As it stands right now, it seems quite clear that CDPR is never going to be adding in their own New Game Plus to Cyberpunk 2077, and as of right now, this mod is literally your best option to get it. But another mod that is going to greatly improve exploration in Night City is DLC Liberation Protocol. And this mod is really going to hit on two levels. First, if you've not been playing Cyberpunk 2077 for its entire lifespan since December 2020, there's a bunch of content you probably missed. Over the past 4 years, Cyberpunk has had a ton of Twitch or GOG drops, this implementing a piece of content like a custom sword or a custom shirt you can get. So on one hand, it's just some free, officially made content for Cyberpunk that you may have missed, but on the original release, oftentimes these drops would just be added into your stash, a very boring way to get some new content instantly. Instead, this mod will implement many of those drops into the world around you. So you might be doing a gig and suddenly stumble upon this epic sword right in the center of that location that you can just take for yourself. To me, that's a lot cooler than just finding the sword in your stash. At its core, it really is a simple mod, but it implements this content so much better compared to what we had previously that I really do consider it a must download. It just makes the world a bit more interesting. Plus, several of these weapons are very notable and iconic, so you'll want to be using them. And if you do want even more iconic weapons in Night City, do you remember a bit earlier in this video when I mentioned that I would be covering some less popular mods to release in 2024? Well, one mod that I genuinely think is one of the most underrated mods for this game right now is Extra Iconics. So technically speaking, this is mostly a combination of other mods. Technically, it does have a couple of extra features on its own, but to me, this is the single best weapon mod for Cyberpunk 2077 right now. Extra Iconics will add in a variety of new iconic weapons into Night City, and what elevates this is how well implemented these all are. These are going to be fully custom weapons, oftentimes taking on very similar visuals to other weapons in Night City, but of course with very unique and distinct effects. And they're all going to be distributed in ways that make sense into the world, whether it just be a organic spot in the world to find that new weapon or which vendor is going to sell them. And what really elevates this mod for me is a lot of these iconic weapons are really unique, often having gameplay defining mechanics that make it so these weapons don't play like all the other weapons in the game. Take for example the Special Delivery. This is a weapon that's going to fire explosive rounds, but they only explode as you reload. You of course can use this to set up some hilarious situations. Tag an enemy a few times and then wait until he backs near his friends to blow all of them up, or hey, just load up that corpse with explosives and toss it near some other enemies to blow them all up. Nethound is a netrunner's dream. It's a stealth sniper that upon impact will scramble the enemy's memory and immediately hack their network, revealing everything on it. The perfect way to begin an encounter as a netrunner, and the sister weapon, NetRam, is potentially even better. NetRam will immediately scramble an enemy's cyberware, potentially neutralizing an otherwise major threat. And some of these weapons get even more custom with unique mechanics being added in as well. Firestorm comes with fire rate controls, so you can swap this one on the fly between being fully automatic or semi-automatic, and of course which fire mode you're using will have a different effect. Semi-auto shots are going to be explosive rounds, while full auto fire will lower enemies' elemental resistances. So start off by spraying into a crowd to weaken everyone, then pick them off one by one with powerful explosive rounds. And there's a ton more. Extra Iconics includes over 10 new iconic weapons for Night City, and every single one of these is super fun with unique mechanics built around them. Many of these weapons aren't just something to keep in your stash, but something to build out an entire character around. Some of the effects and unique synergies are just too much fun to mess with to not download this mod. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's a bunch of free and interesting new weapons in Night City. Who doesn't want that? But if you ever wanted a survival mode in Cyberpunk 2077, just a couple of months ago, we got the best survival mode mod for this game so far with Dark Future. This, of course, will add in the basics. So now you're going to need to eat, drink, and sleep to maintain your stats in Night City. This is all content already in Cyberpunk 2077, which is what made this mod really appeal to me. In the base game, you don't really have to take advantage of any of this. You're not going to be going to many food vendors, and you don't need to shower or sleep. But now with Dark Future, if you neglect some of these things, your character will build up debuffs. Many of these debuffs eventually impacting movement or some of your combat abilities, so you'll actually feel them as you're playing. As a result, you're going to organically start going to food vendors, taking a stop back at your apartment for a rest, and as annoying as some of these might sound on paper, in actual gameplay, it's more fun than it seems. A lot of this fits in really naturally. You'll do a couple of gigs, have a ton of items on you, then head back to your apartment to unload some stuff, reorganize your inventory, and build out your character in an additional way. It really makes the game and your experience in Night City overall far more immersive. It feels like you're actually living here. This mod has some optional effects like limiting fast travel and even how often you could call a vehicle, and it really enhances the overall gameplay. Things go a bit slower, but it allows you to appreciate some of the stuff you otherwise were missing. And there is a fourth major need with nerve. This is your your character's nerve, basically your stress level in Night City, and this will be impacted by how many enemies you're taking down, neglecting some of your other survival needs, but also when other enemies hack you, your nerve will decline. Yeah, I can see how somebody hacking into the literal control of my body parts would make me a bit uneasy. Nerve is going to contain some of the biggest debuffs to your character, and you can literally die of a heart attack if it gets too low, but it also forces you to truly live in Night City. To resolve nerve, you'll need to calm down. You can use quick and unhealthy fixes like real life, so resorting to things like cigarettes and alcohol, which have new addictive qualities with this mod, but there are also healthy alternatives. You can hang out with your partner or even just go to a bar to reduce your nerve in even larger ways. And of course, it gets you using some of those features of Night City more and actually have a purpose behind them. Dark Future is largely what you would expect from a survival mod, and that alone probably would have gotten it onto this list. But Dark Future really does take things to the next level with its implementation. Quite a few new items are implemented with this one to hook into some of these new mechanics, including several new pieces of cyberware, as well as the mod itself is incredibly easy to use. It does feature a full configuration menu, so you can tweak everything to how you want it to be, and it has easy to follow tutorials, so as some of the stuff pops up in game, the game will literally explain how to deal with it. Dark Future is one of those mods that you can just download and immediately jump into because it'll explain all of the features to you. But the newest mod on this list, and easily one of the most impressive mods to ever come to Cyberpunk, is new Lifepath Intro Fresh Start. This will implement a completely new fourth start option into Cyberpunk 2077. With this start, you aren't adopting just one life path, but instead a hybrid. You gave up a corporal life to roam the open roads as a nomad, but now you're returning to Night City for some work. With this one, you'll begin at the Orbital Air Terminal, going through security, which features some custom voice work.
Looks like everything checks out. Welcome to Night City. Please move along.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
And after that, you're met with friends. With this start, Misty and Jackie are going to immediately be friendly to you and even greet you upon arrival.
Worked up an appetite, just waiting.
Typical Jackie.
It's good to see you too, Jack. How you been?
Yeah, I know how it is. Can't complain, but we ain't here to shoot the shit about me.
But just put simply, this is insane. Considering we still don't have official mod tools for Cyberpunk, we're seeing here is some seriously impressive scene and voice work being done. The reason you don't see other mods like this is because this required a ton of trial and error to get working. And the mod even continues from there. You'll have a nice walk out to the car where you have even further interactions with Victor.
Can't stop digging Night City.
Yep. No place like home.
Whole family in one place. Ha! Finally!
Oh, Jackie.
Vic. So good to see you, old Ripper.
Hey, V. How you feeling?
Can't believe I'm saying this, but not bad at all.
That's the attitude.
And then you're off into Night City, where you'll begin the first job with Jackie. This mod really is a technical marvel. It actually is insane to me that someone was even able to create this with the tools that are currently available, but it's also a mod that provides a really nice functional benefit. I'm sure for many of you, over the past 4 years, you've done all of these starts. You know what the Nomad, Corpo, and Street Kid starts look like. Just having something new and novel is incredibly powerful to increase the longevity of Cyberpunk 2077 and make that next modded playthrough truly feel distinct and unique. As well as this start is probably the most feel-good of any of the intros to Cyberpunk. And while I do have one mod that impressed me more than almost anything else this year, and really was just a ton of fun to mess with, I first do want to mention a few honorable mentions that were still incredibly impressive releases from 2024. Coming from the same mod author, no more duplicate NPCs as well as responsive NPCs make the streets of Night City just far more interesting. No more duplicate NPCs does just that. It removes those duplicate NPCs you would always see on the streets, so now everyone is unique, while responsive NPCs will make it so the other other NPCs will comment on you in more ways. So they can make comments around certain things you've done recently, what you're wearing, or potentially even what you're driving. FSR3 frame generation gets a mention as this mod is literally better than CDPR and AMD's official FSR3 implementation. Yeah, I mean, like right now, if you're using FSR, download the mod because it's a better version. And last but not least, CyberMP. This one isn't yet released, but once it does, it'll definitely earn a spot on this list. But yeah, modders added surprisingly functional and fun multiplayer into Cyberpunk 2077, a single player game. But the mod that genuinely surprised me the most in 2024 was Mjolnir. It really is just one new weapon added into Cyberpunk, but I had so much fun messing around with this weapon that even while I was filming this one for the first time way earlier in 2024, I already knew it was going to make it onto this list. As you can likely tell, Mjolnir is Thor's hammer, which has mysteriously crash landed into Night City. From the onset, I think Mjolnir looks amazing. That definitely is part of this. I think it's one of the coolest looking weapon mods, and I'm not even a big Marvel or Thor fan. But where this thing really excels is in its functionality. This weapon is incredibly strong and incredibly unique, as it's a true melee and ranged weapon hybrid, and really one of the first throwable blunt weapons I've ever seen added to this game. So as just a melee weapon, it has some incredibly powerful effects. Smack enemies with a hammer for a chance to imbue them with energy. You'll sometimes notice enemies start sparking after you hit them, and once you see this, you can use a strong attack to instantly activate the static energy, and this will knock that enemy down. This alone makes it an incredibly powerful melee tool, but it goes even further because activating that energy will also heal you, giving you insane sustain in some of those longer fights. And since Mjolnir is a blunt weapon, this is just the start, because a ton of additional functionality can be unlocked via perks and unique synergies with those perks. So blunt weapons have several unlockable abilities. Of course, they have their own set of finishers that are available, like being able to jump into the air and slam the hammer down onto the ground for area of effect damage. Mjolnir will even deal bonus static damage as you use this. And yeah, obviously as you're doing this, you will truly feel like Thor. It is incredibly satisfying to knock all of those enemies around you. But similarly, you can also sprint and block to knock down enemies as you just run through everyone ahead of you, which does feel like a particularly valid use of Thor's hammer. So as you can see, even as just a melee weapon, this one's super powerful and also very unique. A lot of these effects are pretty distinct from other melee weapons in Cyberpunk, but you can also throw this thing. What you'll notice is a lot of the bonus effects of Mjolnir will actually require stamina to impact. So for example, if you throw the hammer and have enough stamina, as it hits enemies, it'll also shock wherever it lands. And if you do manage to land a headshot, this becomes incredibly powerful. You of course are dealing headshot static damage to that one enemy, but it'll call lightning down, dealing slight damage to nearby enemies and also stunning them. But you can then follow this up by immediately dodging or dashing to get the hammer back in your inventory, and yeah, then just do this over and over while intermixing some melee attacks. This is incredibly fun. You can chain together combos of melee attacks to regenerate some of your HP, but then switch to just flinging your hammer at enemies' heads to stun nearby attackers before finishing everyone off. It may seem rather odd to include a singular weapon mod as my favorite mod of the year, but honestly, this one is just so much fun. The gameplay using this weapon is incredibly unique, but also incredibly satisfying and pretty much unlike anything else available for Cyberpunk 2077 right now. But those are my personal top 10 mods for Cyberpunk 2077 in 2024. Let me know in the comments, do you agree with this list? Is it blasphemous? Did I leave anything out? The future of Cyberpunk 2077 has never really been as unknown as it is right now. Patch 2.2 came out of nowhere, nobody was really expecting that one, and even CDPR had claimed that the updates were over. For Patch 2.2, an outside studio was contracted and overseen by Pal Sasko. Why are you hiring an entire extra studio to work on just one update? At least that's what I was thinking as that was revealed. And with Pal Sasko more recently taking suggestions for further character customization options for his own education, certainly makes me wonder if more updates could be coming to Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk 2077 could end up having a fairly busy 2025. Lots of fans are hoping mod tools come to the game. CDPR hired a bunch of modders who implemented mod tools for The Witcher 3 last year. Could we see the same thing for Cyberpunk this year? And this can make a ton of sense as Cyberpunk 2077 also has a new Netflix series as well as a new live-action project on the way. Neither of those have release dates as of right now, but I do personally suspect we'll be hearing more about both of those in 2025. So Cyberpunk 2077 is kind of in a weird state right now. More is definitely coming to this game in the form of more TV shows and the like. But as far as further updates to this game, we really have no idea. Cyberpunk 2077 could get several more large updates in 2025, or we might have just gotten the last one. I cover basically all of the Cyberpunk news, and I genuinely have no idea what's happening next. But either way, I'm excited. And if you're interested in more Cyberpunk 2077 greatness, check out this video.